All right. I think we are live. Marcus, welcome to Living Off Rentals.
Thank you, Kirby. Thank you for having me here, man. I really appreciate the offer, and I love to talk about living off rentals, man, because that's the bread and butter, right? You just want that mailbox money where money can come in on time every month without any hassle.
That is right. That's right. Yeah, and I'm super happy to have you here. For those who aren't familiar with Marcus, he's the equity guy. He's got a podcast called We Love Equity Real Estate Show. He grew up in Illinois, and I believe you're out in Arizona now, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So he moved out to Arizona, doing all different types of deals. We were talking a little bit before this. We'll cover kind of the gambit here, but I'm excited to talk to you about. A lot of people. There's this discussion of equity versus cash flow. And so I know you've got the equity show, so I want to hear more about, your, whether it's a preference toward equity or it's just kind of a focus or how it's become a focus of yours. But first I want to, give you a chance to fill in some gaps on your background. You and I actually grew up not too far from each other. If you want to share a little bit about your background, how you got into real estate, that'd be great.
Sure. So as you said, Kirby, I'm from Illinois. Grew up about 60 miles south of Chicago, so about 45 minutes south of Chicago, in a small little farming community named Moments. About 3,300 people live there, and grew up on a farm. So we did everything that farmers had to do. I mean, from chasing pigs and raising pigs to going out and planting corn, field corn, harvesting the corn and everything like that. So, but the good thing was we were still close enough to Chicago. So I got the best of both worlds because all of my family was in Chicago. So I would be in the country like Monday through Friday. And then the weekends I would be in the city. But what I liked about it was, growing up on a farm, we learned how to make money. Basically, what we had to do for like our school clothes every year is we would purchase a small piglet at the beginning of the summer, and we would have to raise that piglet, get them as fat as we can. So we would buy them for like $15, and then at the end of the summer, we would take it to the auction, sell them, and that pig would probably be worth $150, $180. So that was our school clothes. So my grandfather and my mother, they taught me to value a dollar. They taught us, okay, you buy low and then you sell high. So that was kind of the foundational principles of investing. I learned at an early age. So it wasn't just, okay, it's time for back to school clothes shopping. Let's go and shop and you get whatever you want. Yeah. No, you understand now, how the money is made and what you do with the money. And then a lot of times I didn't even want back to school clothes because I'm like, man, I earned this money over the summer. I don't want to spend it on something that's not going to yield a return, like some gym shoes. So I learned it at an early age. And from there, kind of spawned into the real estate aspect because my mom, she walked off her job. She had a great paying job. She was a nurse for the state, and she walked off her job because God gave her a calling and she wanted to work with at-risk youth. So she started doing that. We started busing inner city kids from Chicago down to the farm. And from there, a lot of the parents said, hey, you know what? I don't want my kids to come back to the city. They enjoy the farm. Let them stay out there. And we had a 49-acre farm with a house with like multiple bedrooms and things like that. So now I look up and now it's not just me and my brother and my cousins, but it's all of these, strange kids, which was great because we had fun. But at the same time, now we had to hustle even more because now these kids are kind of infringing upon our equity position with our animals and things like that. So to make a long story short, we was busing these kids from the inner city and we started needing more houses. So, and this was probably after I came back from college and everything like that. And I would be the one to go out, try and find these houses. I started working with the contractors, getting them renovated and everything like that. And we opened up a nonprofit agency right in that small little hometown. And now it's, a multi-million-dollar business working with kids, and we have different state contracts. But Again, my real estate career started by, going out, finding these dilapidated houses that we can rehab and put kids in them.
Wow. That is awesome. That's a great way to get started. It's
Well,
funny
it,
because
it, it was a great way to get started. Now that I look back on it, hindsight is always 2020. But at the time, it was really rough because only thing we saw was it was more work. We had to go in, we worked with the renovation crew and things like that. So I was in my early teens all the way up to like my mid 30s. And it was, always extra work. It was never downtime where you just sit down and play the video games. It was always something to do. So anybody that grew up on a farm, you know that there's always work that needs to be done.
Yeah, that is for sure. It's ironic because my wife and I just moved into this house, which is a old farmhouse built in the 1850s. And it's on 10 acres and we're in Valparaiso, Indiana. So about an hour outside of Chicago, like you're talking about, kind of best of both worlds. And we're going to buy the 35 acres next door and expand. And like you said, there's so many different ways you could make money on a farm. All of them are hard work. None of it's easy. But I just feel the same way. I feel like it teaches you a lot of lessons. When I was growing up, I showed some sheep through 4-H actually. So very similar. You buy a little lamb.
4-H.
Yep. And you work all summer to get that sheep ready for showing and sell it for as much as you can. And so it's a great experience for kids. So that's awesome. That's how you started your roots with real estate. Eventually you decided to move to Arizona. Can you talk through, not to jump too far ahead, but can you talk through what your real estate strategy looks like right now? And then maybe we'll go back and then fill in how you got there.
Sure. Right now, we're doing quite a bit of wholesaling. And for those who don't know what wholesaling is, it's just basically acquisitions. You go out, you find a distressed property or distressed situation that a seller is in, get that property under contract. Let's just say for 50 cents on a dollar, and you turn around and you find another investor and you sell that contract or your position in that contract to that new buyer for, let's just say if you put the property under contract for $200,000, but it's worth 400, and you turned around and you wholesale that contract to that end investor for 230. So you make the $30,000, and then I'm just taking that $30,000 and investing that capital into rentals. So we're taking the hard earned income and converting it into passive income.
Got it. Yeah, that's awesome. And I've come across I've interviewed several people on this podcast who are really successful, doing really well, doing this wholesale strategy. And they've kind of had the same realization, it sounds like, where, they've set up their business around the hardest part of real estate, I think, and the most profitable, the acquisitions part. And then, but they realize it's a ton of work, and you got to build the passive income. So you take some of the money off the table, start buying some rentals along the way as well. So if you could go back then, did you start with rentals? Did you start with wholesaling? How did this evolution come?
So we started with rentals, actually. Like I said before, my mom, she walked off her job, and she bought 2 rentals in this small little town. Both of them was like condemned. One was had a fire, and we were looking, I think I was 15 at the time. And I was like, well, why did you buy this? Because again, I'm looking at, this is more work because now we got to go in here and clean this place out and everything like that. Make sure the grass stay cut. So that was kind of my foray into real estate. And those rentals, we kept those. And then for a while, they kind of sat dormant. She rehabbed it, fixed it up, and sold it. The other one, she kept it. And this was in the mid 80s to late 80s. So before fixing was a fad and everything like that. Yeah. And then the other one.
Or HGTV.
Yeah. Or HGTV. The other one she kept and just rented it long term. And then she became older and didn't want to do it anymore. So I took the property over. I was living there actually for a minute. And this property was so bad. I'm going to tell you this, Kirby. I'll tell you one story. When I came home from work at the farm, I walked into the house and I heard some scuffling in the pantry. And when I walked in the pantry, man, it was a possum in my pantry. So that's how bad this house was. It's not like, I walked into a cream puff. It took a lot of work, and it was, so I wasn't the only person living there. I would hear mice in the walls and everything like that. So
yeah, my wife's complaining about mice. You got possum.
Literally
I'll just tell her
walked in
that.
there to go and get some cereal, and it's a possum down in the corner eating my cereal. So but from there, I from what she showed me, I saw the potential, if you just put a little sweat equity into it. So worked on the property, slowly but surely renovated it. And I still own that property today, and it's completely paid off. I'm getting $675 a month from that same property. And I've owned it for, over 15 years now. And so and the reason why I love equity is because I take part of the equity out of that property and use that to go and put down on another property. And then I just do the same thing, over and over and over again. So I get a piece of the cash flow, plus I have the equity, and that equity goes and purchases more cash flow for me. So that's kind of my investment philosophy right there, Kirby.
Got it. Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you about is, a lot of people will say, just focus on cash flow, and equity is just kind of like cherry on top, or appreciation is cherry on top. So when you buy a rental property, how do you evaluate that it makes sense? You're primarily focused on equity, or it's a combination, or
it's a combination? First and foremost, the property has to cash flow. So if the property is not cash flowing, I'm not going to do the deal, because I need that cash flow in order for me to build up that money. So now I can purchase another property and have an equity position in the property. So I'm not going to 100% finance, a deal. I like to try and at least leave 30% open and available for me to be able to pull from. So I always like to go in with some cash at the table. And mind you, these properties are not, $400,000, $500,000. A lot of them are, tops 225, right in that sweet spot of 150 to 225. So that's basically what we're looking for. That's our bread and butter. And as long as they cash flow, we will continue to rent them out and then take that additional cash flow and just harbor it, save it, and then, put it down on another property.
And where are you buying your rental properties now?
This is in Illinois. So we're all across Chicagoland.
Okay. So suburbs, city,
suburbs,
anywhere.
Suburbs, city. And then also, we like the sweet down home country areas as well. That's not too far, where you can still get, 750, 675 to 800 is the lowest, as far as rent. But yeah, we do some higher end things as well.
Okay. So you're in Arizona, and you're wholesaling. So you're doing nationwide wholesaling, or are you mostly wholesaling in select markets, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'm wholesaling here in Arizona, in Illinois, and Kansas City.
Okay, I see. So you're finding deals that you'll wholesale, and then sometimes you'll just take some of the ones in Illinois that you like down yourself and keep them as rentals.
Absolutely. And then the others we just wholesale, and then now we have a wad of cash where we can go and buy more rentals.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you're doing a lot remotely, obviously, if you're not just wholesaling in Arizona. So how does that work for you? How's your team made up, and what does that process look like?
Sure. It's a lot of it is technology, just like where we are right now. We use technology in order to acquire deals. We We normally have one person boots on the ground in that market. That way they can go and walk the property, take pictures, and be that touch point for a seller, because some sellers, they don't mind doing everything via Zoom or over the phone. But sometimes, you start dealing with the older population. They want to shake hands and get to know the person. So we have somebody in the area that can do that. But yeah, most of it is using VAs and over the phone, Kirby. It's not rocket science. It's very simple, but it's just finding the quality people in order to pull it off. So that's the hardest part.
Yeah. Yeah. And with this market right now, I mean, I've never seen anything like this. I started investing in '06 and it was competitive then. But this just seems like it's insane.
It isn't. And I'm really thankful for our rentals, because, our deal flow has changed drastically, because it's so much harder to find deals because of the competition and people willing to pay, exorbitant amounts above market value just to get locked into a property. So for the wholesaler, for the fix and flipper, it is harder to find deals. But once you do find a deal, the disposition is very, very easy.
Yeah. 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 So what's your strategy for finding deals?
We're doing a lot of cold calling. We're still doing direct mail. Not as much, but the cold calling and text messaging is primarily our bread and butter, because it's basically speed to lead. How fast can you get to these people that are in some sort of distressed situation? So if you have a landlord that's recently evicted someone, we want to try and get to them immediately. And there are lead sources out there, in order to find those sellers that's in those positions, like PropStream, things like that. So yeah, it's speed to lead, and the fastest way is by picking up the phone and calling them and saying, "Hey, I noticed that you recently had an eviction. Is there anything that we can do to help? We like to buy properties, that are going through transition, and this may be an opportunity for you." So, and it's just having that conversation. And again, you got to kiss a lot of frogs in order to get to that deal, but that's just the name of the game.
Yeah. So you get these lists from like PropStream or other list sources, and then it's VAs that are just calling them.
Yep, dialing for dollars. So
Got it.
You can go to like propstream.com. I got an affiliate link I can share with you, Kirby. Okay. That way your listeners can get some free trials and they can go on there and test it. And then I have a demo video also. But yeah, it's pulling a list, and even if you're just a one-man show, you just want to skip trace. So send that list to a skip tracer, like Lead Sherper or something like that, to get the telephone numbers, and then just pick up the phone and just start dialing. I mean, that's the easiest way right now to get started if you're trying to acquire some properties.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like, I think people try to complicate it more than it needs to be. It's just like having that conversation. So that's great to hear that, but like you said, it's a competitive market. And I think you're smart in terms of, slowing down your deal flow rather than overpaying. I think there's people right now who are like, well, the market just keeps going up, so I can just keep paying higher and higher. And somebody's going to, like Warren Buffett says, when the tide goes out, you see who's got their pants down. And there's going to be some people who get stuck. It's like, the music stops and, the prices don't go up anymore, and you're left holding a lot of properties. So I agree with that strategy, and having the rental properties there as a buffer to backfill some of that income that you need, I think is really smart. So in terms of the rentals, then from a remote standpoint, because you live in Arizona, but the rentals are in Illinois, how have you found, my biggest challenge with rentals has been management when I'm not there. I've struggled with so many managers that I don't know if I'm just anal and I expect too much, but they just will not manage it the way that I manage it. So how have you found good managers?
Actually, you know what, Kirby? I was, if you can believe this, I was managing the property. I was self-managing from Arizona.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was self-managing, and this was when the portfolio was a bit smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I was still self-managing, wasn't having any problems. The rent was coming in consistently. I had one tenant that would pay the rent, but it'll be okay. Here's $300 here. Here's another 200. Then finally, another 200. But
Yeah.
It was always within that 30-day time frame. But then one day I got a call. It was about 4:00 in the morning, and that same tenant called and said, "Hey, you know what? The detached garage is on fire." And I was like, oh, "Okay. First of all, did you call the fire department? Before you call me, call the fire department." And then I just told him, I said, "Okay, well, I'll call you in the morning. It's nothing I can do. I'll call you in the morning, let the fire department put it out. I got insurance." So, I just contacted the insurance company and we went from there. So it was after that situation, I said, you know what, I need to get a property manager in place. And you know what, I called around the local community, called a bunch of realtors, said, "Hey, you know what, who's a great property manager?" And I put some ads up on Facebook, and this one name kept consistently popping up. And I called her and sat down, had a meeting with her, let her know that I was out of state. And this is what, my portfolio, and I'm looking for someone to manage them. And we've been working together now consistently for 3 years and no problems. She has the same eye that I have. She's constantly on the tenants. She drive-bys the properties quite often, just to make sure things are being kept in the standard that we like to keep them in. And honestly, I think I was just lucky, Kirby.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, so you found her through referrals, I think is a good piece of advice there, rather than just, because every property manager I've ever talked to says that they're going to be the best property manager ever. And I'm going to tell you, they're going to be terrible. But if other people can say, "I've used this person and they're great," I think that goes a long way. So,
and one thing I would tell your listeners is, when you're looking for a property manager, just ask them for a list of properties that they manage.
Yeah.
And drive by those properties, visit those properties. Sometimes you can even be as bold as knock on the door and talk to the tenants and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm thinking about renting from this landlord. How do they maintain the property? How do they keep up with the property? What's their response time on maintenance concerns?" Things like that. And you'll definitely get a real feel from the tenants. But I would say, naturally talk to more than one or two of them so you can get a true evaluation of how the property manager is doing.
Yeah. Great advice. I'm always curious to learn from people what your best deal you've done, because you've been doing this for a while. So what's your best deal and what's your worst deal, and what maybe one or two takeaways was from those, or lessons learned?
So my best deal, I happen to be in Illinois. And one of the things that I like to tell landlords is always build a relationship with the community bank. So no matter how big your city is or how small it is, they have smaller community banks. Open up an account with that community bank, even if you just put a couple of $100 in there every month. That way you can start building those relationships. So built a relationship with this community bank, and I would always go in whenever I'm in town, and I would say, "Hey, you know what? Just in town." I had an account, would talk to the teller, but then I started building a relationship with some of the senior management of the bank. And then I would go in and I would say, "Hey, how's it going? I'm in town, just checking to see if you got anything on your books." The branch vice president said, "Hey, you know what? We got this property. We got it on the market." Went and took a look at it. I think the property was, at the time, this was about 5 or 6 years ago, property was like 30 grand. But I knew that the rent in the area, I can get, $900 a month, for the rent, depending on the condition. Walked the property, Everything looked good. I bought the property basically because it was 3 bedrooms and it had a brand new furnace and AC unit. So I went back to the bank and I said, okay, well, how long have you had it? And I'll be willing to take it, but I can only pay like 10 grand for it. And they was like, okay, fine, we'll take it. So got the property for 10 grand. I put another 17 into it. And now I'm renting that property for $1,200 a month.
Jeez.
So, and
that's a slam dunk.
Yeah. And that property just constantly spits out cash. And when I put the 17 grand into it, all of it was cosmetic, except for the roof. I put on a new roof, new carpet, paint, appliances, and windows. I believe that was all that I did to the property. And the first tenant got in there. She was in there for 3 years paying $950. And then we just turned that property over. I put another, I think, $5 grand into it just to freshen it up. And now it's paying $1,200 a month. So that was my best property. And at closing, I didn't even pay the 10 grand. I ended up paying $7,500 for the property. So that was like the best deal. The worst deal, I would probably say I bought a property in a extremely rural community. I had one idea for the property. We were actually going to use the property for a boys group home, a small boys group home. But then our contract with the state got rescinded. So now I was stuck with this property in this very rural area, was trying to rent this property out, was renting it out successfully. And then this is where the garage burned down naturally. Then the garage burned down. But you know what? I kind of recouped some of the losses on that property because I had a tenant that I did a seller carry on, and he put $17K down. And he was renting, I think his note was like 300 and something bucks a month. And he's just been late on paying his note every month. So I think he's behind like $1,000, so, and what I mean by that being a bad deal was the numbers wasn't that bad. It was just a headache that came along with that property. It was just a bad deal.
Yeah. So the lesson from that is just like the time and the bandwidth that it eats up can be super costly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those are great examples. And speaking of the first one too, I think that's such smart advice that you give to people around making that relationship with the community bank, especially right now, because people are like, well, banks aren't going to have properties sitting on their books right now because it's so hot, they can sell them in a second. But that's right now. Like, you got to think like chess, not checkers. Like, the market is what it is now. A year from now, there could be a total collapse. And now that guy who you have a relationship with, who you've had an account with for the last year, now he's got all these properties he needs to sell. And who does he go to? Goes to the person who has been with the bank and that he can trust. So, absolutely. Yeah. So I think
the funny thing about that, Kirby, was because he hold a couple of notes that we have. So when I bought that property, even the $17,000 really didn't come out of my pocket. I contacted him and I said, hey, you know what? I just want a line of credit on one of my other properties. This is where the equity comes into play. We pulled the $17,000 or $20,000 from there. So they loaned us the money on that to fix up the property that we just bought from them for $7,500. So we were basically out of no money out of pocket. And then once we fixed that property up, I went back to him and said, hey, I want to borrow against this property because now I see a duplex that's selling over here for $110,000. So the property that I bought for 75 is now worth 65. I mean, that I bought for 7,500 is now worth 65 grand. So now I went and pulled equity out of that property to go and buy a duplex. So just those small little strategic moves and having those relationships can help build your portfolio pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It's those little steps that add up in a big way. So you got 3 units out of that one,
Out
out
of
of that
that
one
one
deal.
deal. Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. A lot of people who come on the show, a lot of guests, we have a discussion around goals and how their goals evolve over time. So, what's your goal? How have your goals evolved, and what is your goal now with what you're doing?
Okay. So before it was really building a sizable wholesale business. That way we can generate cash. But that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of moving parts. And comfortably, I enjoy the mailbox money. I enjoy the rental money coming in. So right now our goal has shifted, into buying more small commercial units, you know, 10 plexes, 12 plexes, up to, 24 units, which we're getting into. And I'm learning the differences now with the different type of finance. And so right now we're trying to do, 150 units in the next 2 years, which I believe we'll be able to hit that pretty easily. But it's just making sure we strategize and have the right pieces in play. And we don't know if they're all going to be in the Midwest. So, as the market shifts, sometimes you have to be fluid and you have to look and say, okay, where can I capitalize our dollars? Is it in the Southeast? Is it, in the South? Is it in the Midwest? Because the coastal states, it's ridiculous. The prices are ridiculous, and that's the reason why I stopped really investing in Arizona, is because the prices have run up so fast, so quick, to where a lot of the numbers just don't make sense, where I can spend half of what I spend in Arizona in the Midwest and still clear a sizable cash flow monthly return.
Yeah. Yeah. That's smart to adjust as you go. Yeah. And I watched an interview that you did where you talked about your goal of 50 units by 50. So now you're at 150 as your goal. So it's interesting how the goals adjust over time and grow.
And the reason being is because of relationships. That's one of the things that I want to drive home to people, is that, a lot of times we say, well, we don't have the money to do this. We don't have the expertise to do that. Well, it's all out there, even including the money. I mean, some of the deals that I've had financed was, private money from my attorney or from a relationship that I built up over time. So right now is, guys, you got to get out there and you got to let people know exactly what you're doing or what you're trying to do, and share with people the progress that you're making, So I understand some people are not savvy with social media and things like that, but you got to be able to spread the word and let people know exactly what you're doing, because the money is out there, the resources is out there, and you can go from having a goal of 50 units to 150 units change quickly, because once you start putting it out there, you start noticing, wow, okay, things can change quite drastically really quick.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a perspective shift, and just adding those little pieces on that, like we talked about, it adds up in a big way. So, that's cool. So if people are listening to this and they, have more questions for you or want to reach out or work with you in some way, what's the best way, or maybe be on your buyers list? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
They can email me at mmaloney, so MMALONEY at equityri.com. You can just email me there, or all of my social media handles are MRCS Maloney, at Instagram, at Facebook, Twitter, everything, or go to my YouTube channel. Just Google my name. I'm out there.
Yeah. And Marcus has an excellent podcast, like we mentioned, called We Love Equity Real Estate Show. So you can look that up as well. There's some great guests on there as well. So Marcus, I appreciate you taking the time today to come on and share your wisdom with us. I know the community is really going to benefit from this.
Well, thank you so much, Kirby. I really appreciate it. And guys, get out there and take some action and make some things happen, because it's possible and it's ready, willing, and available for you. You just have to get out there and do it.
Absolutely. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.